The Galactic Council had been very clear in their warnings. Humans were not to interact with the Vrexian species under any circumstances. The Vrexians were apex predators from a death world, where the gravity was twice that of Earth, where the atmosphere crackled with electrical storms, and where every creature had evolved to kill or be killed. Their young were born with fully functional claws and teeth, capable of tearing through steel plating within their first week of life. Ambassador Kelthera of the Zentari Collective stood in the observation deck of the diplomatic station. Her three eyes narrowed in concern as she watched the human woman enter the containment area below. The human had introduced herself simply as Dr. Sarah Chen, an animal behaviorist from Earth. She wore no protective gear, carried no weapons, and seemed entirely unconcerned about the fact that she was about to enter a room with a Vrexian cub. The cub in question had been orphaned 3 cycles ago when its parent's ship had malfunctioned near the station. It was small by Vrexian standards, only the size of an Earth lion with midnight black scales that rippled with bioluminescent patterns. Its eyes glowed a deep crimson, and its mouth was filled with rows of serrated teeth designed to crush bone and tear flesh. The creature had already injured 5 security personnel who had attempted to feed it or clean its enclosure. Dr. Chen walked into the room with calm, measured steps. The cub immediately noticed her presence. Its head snapped toward her, ears flattening against its skull. A low growl rumbled from its chest, vibrating through the observation deck's speakers. The sound was enough to make Kelthera's scales bristle with instinctive fear. Yet the human continued walking forward, her posture relaxed, her hands visible at her sides. The Vrexian cub crouched low, its haunches tensing. Every predatory instinct in its young body was screaming at it to attack. The strange creature before it was soft, weak, with no visible claws or armor. Easy prey. The cub's tail lashed back and forth, and then it lunged. The movement was lightning fast, a blur of black scales and flashing teeth. The cub's jaws opened wide, aiming directly for Dr. Chen's outstretched hand. Kelthera gasped, her central eye widening in horror. She was about to witness the death of a human diplomat, and the resulting political catastrophe would be devastating. But Dr. Chen didn't pull her hand away. Instead, just as the cub's teeth were about to close on her flesh, she moved with surprising speed. Her other hand came up and tapped the cub firmly on the nose. Not a slap, not a hit, just a quick, decisive tap. The effect was instantaneous and utterly unexpected. The Vrexian cub jerked backward, its eyes widening in confusion. It sat down heavily on its haunches, one paw coming up to rub at its nose. The growling stopped. The aggressive posture melted away, and then, to the absolute astonishment of everyone watching, the cub made a sound that was distinctly different from anything they had heard before. It was a rhythmic, rumbling purr. Dr. Chen smiled and lowered herself to one knee, bringing herself closer to the cub's level. She held out her hand again, palm down, fingers relaxed. The cub sniffed cautiously at her hand, its nostrils flaring as it processed her scent. Then, moving slowly, it pressed its broad head against her palm. The purring grew louder. Kelthera's translator struggled to process what she was seeing. It was impossible. Vrexians didn't purr. They didn't show submission. They certainly didn't respond to discipline from prey species. Yet there was the cub, leaning into the human's touch, its tail now swaying gently instead of lashing aggressively. Dr. Chen began to speak, her voice soft but clear enough for the observation deck's audio pickups to catch. "Good boy. That's a good boy. You're just scared, aren't you? Lost your parents, stuck in a strange place with strange creatures. I know it's frightening." Her hands moved with practiced confidence, scratching behind the cub's ears, running along its scaled neck, finding the spots that made the purring intensify. The cub, this supposedly untamable apex predator infant, rolled onto its back, exposing its vulnerable belly. Its legs kicked playfully in the air, and its tongue lolled out of its mouth in what could only be described as contentment. The human had done the impossible. She had turned a feared predator into a playful pet in less than 5 minutes. Kelthera activated the communication system. "Dr. Chen, this is Ambassador Kelthera. How did you accomplish that? Our xenobiologists said it was impossible to pacify a Vrexian through behavioral techniques." Dr. Chen looked up at the observation window, still scratching the cub's belly. "Ambassador, with respect, your xenobiologists don't have dogs." "Dogs?" Kelthera's translator struggled with the term. "Domesticated canines. We've been working with predatory pack animals for over 30,000 years. This little guy isn't that different from a puppy, just scaled up and more dangerous. But the basic principles are the same. Establish boundaries, show confidence, reward good behavior, correct bad behavior immediately and consistently." The cub chose that moment to wrap its powerful forelimbs around Dr. Chen's arm, pulling it toward its mouth. Kelthera tensed, ready to call for emergency intervention, but Dr. Chen simply tapped the cub's nose again and said firmly, "No biting." The cub released her arm immediately, looking almost apologetic. "You see," Dr. Chen continued, "predators understand hierarchy and discipline. The tap on the nose told him that I'm the dominant one in this interaction. It didn't hurt him, but it surprised him and interrupted his aggressive behavior. The key is timing. You have to correct the behavior the instant it happens, not after. And then you immediately reward compliance with affection and positive reinforcement." Over the next hour, Dr. Chen worked with the cub, teaching it basic commands using a combination of hand signals and simple words. Sit, stay, come. The cub learned with remarkable speed, its intelligent eyes tracking every movement, processing every interaction. When it followed a command correctly, it received praise and gentle physical affection. When it misbehaved, it received a firm tap and a verbal correction. Word spread quickly through the station. Representatives from a dozen different species gathered in the observation deck, watching in amazement as the human woman played with what they all considered to be one of the galaxy's most dangerous creatures. She threw a ball, and the cub chased it with enthusiastic bounds, returning it to her feet. She engaged in a gentle tug-of-war game, teaching the cub to control the strength of its bite. She even allowed it to climb on her, its weight considerable but manageable, as it licked her face with a tongue that could strip paint from metal. A Korthian security officer, his exoskeleton clicking nervously, spoke up. "But humans are classified as a moderate threat-level species. How can you interact so casually with a creature that is rated as extreme threat?" Dr. Chen paused in her play to look up at the growing crowd. "I think that's where you might be misunderstanding humans. We don't measure ourselves by our individual physical capabilities. We measure ourselves by our ability to form relationships across species boundaries. On Earth, our apex predators became our companions. Wolves became dogs. Wild cats became house cats. We've worked with bears, with great apes, with creatures that could kill us without effort. But we learned their languages, understood their needs, and built bonds of trust." She gestured to the Vrexian cub, now lying contentedly with its head in her lap. "This baby isn't evil or uncontrollable. He's just a child who lost his parents and doesn't know how to process that trauma. He was acting out because he was scared and frustrated. All he needed was someone who understood predator behavior and could give him structure and affection." An elderly Thren observer, its crystalline body refracting the light, chimed in with a resonant voice. "But the Vrexian adults are not like their young. They are fully aware, highly intelligent, and have conquered 17 star systems through military might. What you have accomplished with the child may not translate to the adults." Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "You're right that children and adults behave differently. But I'd argue that the basics of social interaction remain the same across developmental stages: respect, clear communication, understanding of body language, and appropriate responses to behavior. These are universal concepts. As if to demonstrate her point, the main entrance to the containment area suddenly opened. Two massive Vrexian adults strode in, their scales gleaming like polished obsidian, their height making them tower over the human. These were the diplomatic representatives who had been frantically searching for the orphaned cub. They had finally managed to cut through the bureaucratic delays and reach the station. The atmosphere in the observation deck became electric with tension. Everyone knew what Vrexians did to those who touched their young without permission. The species was fiercely protective, and their justice was swift and brutal. Dr. Chen was almost certainly about to die. But the human didn't run. She didn't show fear. Instead, she gently woke the sleeping cub and stood, placing herself slightly between the cub and the adults. Her posture was protective, but not aggressive. She spoke clearly in the Vrexian language, her pronunciation rough but understandable. "I am Dr. Sarah Chen. Your cub was frightened and alone. I have cared for him in the absence of his family. He is unharmed and healthy." The larger of the two Vrexians, a female with silver markings along her crest, approached slowly. Her eyes, glowing like red stars, fixed on the human with an intensity that would have made most species flee. She looked down at the cub, who was now pressing against Dr. Chen's legs, purring and perfectly content. The female Vrexian reached out with one massive clawed hand. The observers held their breath, and then she placed that hand gently on Dr. Chen's shoulder, careful not to let her claws pierce the fabric. "You have shown our bloodline great kindness, human. In your care, our young one found safety when we could not reach him. This is a debt of honor." The male Vrexian knelt down, bringing his fearsome face level with the cub. He made a series of clicking sounds, and the cub responded with enthusiastic chirps and purrs. Then the male looked at Dr. Chen with what she interpreted as respect. "The young one speaks well of you. He says you taught him discipline and gave him comfort. These are the marks of a proper guardian. We acknowledge your actions." Dr. Chen bowed slightly, a gesture of respect she'd learned was appropriate for Vrexian culture. "He's a wonderful child, smart, affectionate, and eager to learn. You should be very proud." The female Vrexian made a sound that the translator identified as laughter. "The others said you tapped his nose when he tried to bite you. Is this true?" "Yes. He needed to learn boundaries." Both adult Vrexians made the laughing sound now, a deep rumbling that shook the floor. "No one has dared to discipline a Vrexian cub in 3 generations. You are either very brave or very foolish, human." Dr. Chen smiled. "Maybe a bit of both, but mostly I just saw a scared kid who needed help." The revelation spread through the galactic community like wildfire. Humans, it turned out, had an almost supernatural ability to form bonds with predatory species. What other species saw as monsters to be feared and contained, humans saw as potential friends. They could read body language across species barriers, could interpret subtle social cues, and had an instinctive understanding of pack dynamics that came from tens of thousands of years of coexistence with their own world's predators. Within a year, human-animal behaviorists were in high demand across the galaxy. They were called in to handle everything from aggressive guard beasts to traumatized war animals to endangered predator species that needed help adapting to new environments. Dr. Chen herself became something of a legend, the human who had tamed the untamable and shown the galaxy that predators and prey could not only coexist, but thrive together. And the Vrexian cub, now named Chen's honor by his adoptive family, grew up to become a bridge between species, living proof that with understanding and respect, even the fiercest creatures could find common ground with the softest ones.